So Kirsten, I'll leave it to you and your team to do kind of an overview. And we'll kick it off.
For sure. Hey, welcome everyone. My name's Kirsten. I'm the marketing director here at FlexKey. Thank you so much for those of you that can attend. And with that, I will lead you with Chief Client Advocate.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. Good afternoon. We're super excited that you could join us today to learn a little bit about Island, the enterprise browser, and specifically how that it is being utilized in public sector spaces around security and compliance. These things are constantly evolving, and Island is a technology that is constantly evolving to meet those needs. So we are really excited that you could join us today to learn a little bit more about that. I guess we'll go around, do a quick introductions over on the FlexKey side, and then we'll do the Island side, and then we'll go ahead and get kicked off. And with that, I will let Donovan introduce himself.
My name is Donovan Linton. I'm the solution architect here at FlexKey.
All right. Stephanie, you want to go ahead and do a quick intro?
Sure. I'm in the flood space on the east coast of the country right now, and joining me is one of our tech gurus, Adrian Cunningham, who is he's a sales engineering director. So with that, I will turn it over to him so that we can kind of jump in to the overview of the Island solution.
Okay, appreciate that. Cool. Well, then, let me share this out. We'll start with the quick kind of overview PowerPoint slide, and I'll jump into a demo. Probably a lot of questions, so jump in as you wish. I'll be glad to kind of maneuver this any way you want. So let me see here if I can make this happen. I don't use Teams all the time, so give me 1 second. Forgive me, guys. 1 second.
While that we're waiting, Adrian, I guess while you're pulling that up, I would love to know and maybe get the conversation started about how Island is specifically creating solutions and policies that are catered to the public sector. Or is there anything, I guess, off the top of your mind that comes to the front?
Well, when I think about what we're doing, it's, we've got education, you've got government entities, I came from the SLED background, another job, another lifetime. As I kind of get into this, it's a browser, and everybody, not just enterprise companies, but, government entities are essentially, everybody's moving to the browser to serve up access to their applications. So it really kind of applies across the board. I don't see whether there's one specific vertical that we really sit into or just fall into. But again, we can look at certain situations, whether it's, education, right? We want to only give certain types of access, whether it's on Chromebooks for students. We can manage all that interaction and essentially put guardrails on what the end user does. So I think I've got this figured out here, guys. 1 second, let me try this again here. All right, guys, I will get this. I'm hitting here. All right, so I'll quickly jump into this. So to kind of kick this off, a little history on the company itself. Island's been around since 2015 or 2020 of August 15th, so about 4.5 years. And we started selling public about 3.5 years ago. Myself, I've been in this space for quite some time. I don't want to age myself too much, probably about close to 25 years. And that being said, I started off in doing desktop support, then worked my way over into security teams, but then eventually jumped over into the sales side, the dark side, if you will. But I point that out because I have sold a lot of products and I've seen a lot of technology. And I truly believe what we have here with Island is something pretty special. And when I think of that, you think of like Tesla, right? They've kind of redefined the car. Well, we redefined the browser for the enterprise. But of course, you're going to need to see it, of course, to realize the capabilities. Again, in all transparency, when I was approached about joining the company, my first thoughts were, well, why would I, sell browsers if I can download them for free? But I was quickly proven wrong. And so in saying that, what I kind of get into here is that Island's, to me, probably one of the more simpler products I've worked with, but it's also one of the most powerful tools I've supported. And we really come up with a unique and novel way as far as how we can integrate user enablement within the browser, security, and how work is done. A little history or a little bit of background. You might have heard that we just raised some more capital. We've now raised over $750 million from our VCs. We're currently evaluated around about $5 billion now, or almost $5 billion evaluation. We're in about 20% of the Fortune 500 companies. We've got over 3 million browsers deployed. So a lot of good things happening on the back end. In fact, if you're looking at some of the VCs on here, like CyberStarts or Sequoia, Stripes, we've got some of their founders on our board. So we are really kind of in a space now where we're really building out this vertical. In fact, we're working direct line with Gartner to define this. But I do believe we've got the first mover's advantage, if you will. If you're looking at some of the market traction, we've got essentially 450. A lot of big names here. Marriott, we've got about 625 browsers deployed, 625,000 browsers deployed. Their license is bigger than that. We're in about 7 of the top 10 financials. In fact, we started off more in the financial vertical because we knew they would really put us through the gauntlet, test us out, pen test us, that type of thing. But as you can see, it was asked or mentioned. It's a browser. Everybody uses a browser. You probably have 3 browsers on each one of your devices today. So when we look at adding this as the tool here for your corporate portal, if you will, as I'll get into, not a heavy lift at all. And again, I'm going to get into a little bit of the why here and explain that, and then I'll jump into the demo. But just kind of wanted to give you kind of the lay of the land of where we're at currently. The question I'm going to ask here is, what's the application or the enterprise application I utilize most? It's obviously the browser, right? And so the opportunity here is because of just what I mentioned. The browser is now being utilized as kind of your main pivot point, or it's your integration point, your portal that actually serves up access to everything else that you're utilizing. But unfortunately, the browser itself, while it's a cool technology, it was never built for the enterprise. It was never made for the enterprise user. It's a consumer technology, really geared around advertising and consumer content. And that being the case, it's kind of funny that because of that, we still see, whether it's a government entity or another financial entity, they're putting everything into the browser, but yet we're utilizing it with Chrome or Edge or Safari, you name it, which I could download right now and utilize on my iPad. So it's not really geared towards the enterprise. And what we're doing is we're solving for a specific business need. We're solving for a consumer browser, again, that was built for advertisement, has no support contract. There's probably one of the applications within your stack that has no support contract, and we're incorporating enterprise capability into the browser for a better user experience with consistent protection. And if we kind of think about what we're doing currently, if you're looking at this screenshot, this is kind of really where we have gone since we decided to put our business out on the web over the last 25 years. And if you're being honest with yourself, I'm looking at this and thinking, hey, this is pretty hard to manage. It's very complicated. It's kind of kludgy. It's not really a modernized way of giving access to services or protecting the flow of information. I mean, we've got things like where we start bolting on a proxy or backhaling the traffic to your on-prem stack or your cloud security stack. You've got VPNs. And as an administrative side of this, when I'm looking at this, there's a lot to manage here. And there's a lot of variables here that I have to be concerned about, again, because we've got a consumer browser in the mix, right? And because of that, we start wrapping all these technologies around this to try to protect the data into code that's inside that consumer-based browser. And then what do the end users do? They start adding other variables on top of all this the mess that we're looking at on the screen, right? They start adding their own extensions. For example, I want to be able to utilize Grammarly because when I send that email out, I want to make sure that I don't have any grammatical errors. Well, Grammarly is literally taking the information right off the page. So maybe you've got some kind of intellectual property or whatever you've got within that document, and you're taking that to the cloud. And that cloud's trying to make sure that you're not misspelling anything. But really what that is to me is a keylogger, because you've just taken maybe that specific government information and you're now sending it out to a third party. So that data is lost. But the end user, from their perspective, they're just trying to make it easier for themselves. But you've got all these guardrails in place, as you can see on the screen here. And so what do the end users start doing? They start trying to come up with their own ways to kind of skirt around this to make their job more efficient. So now they're introducing things like maybe creating their own Dropbox account, or they're utilizing their own encryption email service. So this becomes a lot of shadow IT that you're trying to keep up with that you don't typically have visibility into. And then even from the perspective of the IT admin trying to understand how to manage this. And again, if you're utilizing Microsoft Edge as your browser, what happens when they force an update to the latest version and it breaks that extension that you're using for authentication? So there's a number of concerns here. And again, when I'm looking at this, to me, this again is not moving forward into the 21st century. This is kind of a legacy mindset. It's not a modernized way of managing that traffic flow, being able to understand, again, what the user's doing. If I'm an IT administrator and I'm thinking, how do I onboard users quickly? How do I enable them to do their job efficiently? How to protect the data, the information that's within the browser itself? How do I make this all streamlined? It's not what I have on the screen here. It's really not, because what you're doing with all this, multiple applications here, multiple services are trying to break and inspect that SSL tunnel. And then, of course, you've got the end user that has their own agents on the device also. So there's a number of variables here that we're trying to tackle just for the end user to do their job. And so kind of stating that, that's really where Island really kind of had our vision as to why we needed to create what we consider the enterprise browser. So to kind of get into this, I want to first throw out here what we're looking at on the left-hand side. Island is built on Chromium, which is the second largest open source technology that's out there. And that's important because as you see Chrome, Edge, Brave, Opera on here, they're all probably browsers you've worked with. They're all built on Chromium, just like we built our own browser on top of Chromium. So when I talk about ease of use, mergers and acquisitions, onboarding, everybody's very familiar with how to utilize these browsers. There's no downtime, and you're getting all of the same capability that your expectations are as far as rendering, access to certain types of pages, all the interconnects with maybe proprietary applications you have on-prem or in the cloud. All that's going to work as you'd expect. If it renders in Chrome or Edge, 100% of the time it's going to render in Holland just the same. The real differentiator and the advantages are really kind of what we have on the right-hand side. When we talk about building our own browser on Chromium, as I'll show you when we get into the demo, it looks, feels, smells, and tastes just like Chrome. So that user experience is the same, but where we start differentiating is things like enterprise trust, meaning we're going to have the user single sign-on right into the browser. So if you currently have your IDP in place, so Azure, Okta, Ping, Duo, you name it, we're going to incorporate that into the browser. So the user has to authenticate into the browser. When they do, they're essentially served up the applications that they need to do their job. It is specifically geared around their job duties. I'm not giving everybody access to the keys of how do I say that? The keys of the kingdom, but specifically to the applications that they need access to. So a contractor might have 2 or 3 applications where somebody in finance has 10. And I'll show you some examples of that. We talk about a safe and secure browser. I have the capability to decide when I'm going to give the user access based on even specific SaaS applications, or excuse me, maybe even on-prem applications. So for example, if someone tries to connect to one of your SaaS applications and maybe they do not have disk encryption, I might deny access. Or maybe they're trying to connect from out of the United States. Or if we see a connection being made from China, something of that nature, I can build policies to automatically block that. We've got a lot of automated processes in play to coach the end user based on certain types of things that they're doing. Maybe they're trying to download a file that they shouldn't be. We can have automatic pop-ups that coach the end user, giving them details as far as what types of access they have to that information. We have privacy built in. So, for example, if the user goes to their personal banking site, then I might anonymize that information. I could easily just decide that I'm not going to give them access to any personal sites and only to what they need to do their job. And then they can bounce over to Chrome or Edge or Safari to do their own personal stuff. I can still allow them to have access if I wanted to, maybe to LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, but maybe only allow them the ability to actually read the information inside, LinkedIn, but they can't post information. They can't go on to Twitter or X, whatever we're calling it today, and they can't post anything in there, but they can read. So I've got read-write privileges as far as the interaction within the page. I can prevent them from downloading or trying to right-click on the page and take the information. We look at this last mile of control. All cut, copy, and paste I can completely manage because we do not get involved in the SSL tunnel at all. We're managing, especially layer 7. So anything the end user does within the page itself, I can essentially manage what types of access they have with that specific information. As far as user experience, we streamline a lot of the capability right into the browser itself. We want to make this as frictionless as possible, but then, of course, keep the security in play. We've got our own clipboard manager right inside the browser itself, meaning if the user needs to copy information, I don't want them to write it down. As I'll show you in the demo, they can't take it out of the browser. So it can allow for which applications you can cut, copy, and paste information into. So maybe I might allow them to take information out of one of your specific SaaS apps, Workday, whatever, a GitHub, and then put that into your company cloud storage, but not into their personal Dropbox account. When we look at traffic management, we've got a whole back end with our digital experience, so I can see when users are trying to connect. If they're calling you and saying, hey, the internet's slow, right? If I'm looking at this and a user says, hey, the internet's slow, well, I don't even know where to go with that. There's so many variables here that I have to try to figure this out. What we've got within this is we can say, okay, well, let's go look at our digital experience, and we can say, hey, well, actually the SaaS service that you're trying to connect to is slow, or the actual network you're on has some degradation, or maybe the POP you're connecting to is trying to, route you somewhere outside of the United States. So incorporating all these capability gives a much better user experience, but does not compromise the security or the protection that we're adding to the end user's experience either. To quickly kind of wrap this up, I will hit on some of the use cases here and what we predominantly see, because what I've been selling this product for now 2.5 years, and a lot of times when you haven't seen this, you don't really know what to ask. You will once we get into it. I'm going to prove this out. But when we look at some of the core use cases, first talk about critical SaaS and internal web apps. What we typically see today is for your Outlook or your Google Drive, whatever it might be, or Salesforce, you name it, Workday, GitHub. Typically, people are trying to backhaul that traffic to some type of cloud or on-prem security stack, and they rely on the API to make sure the user can or cannot do certain types of things. What we're doing is we're essentially just giving direct access to that specific SaaS service, and we're relying on the authentication into the browser to give them that access, but then also control, or should I say, manage their only access to said service through the Island browser. I can't just open up Chrome and go directly back to that same Google Drive. I have to go through Island. But if we can allow you to offload, maybe even having to utilize a VDI session or some type of virtual machine to gain access to those SaaS services, I can do it right through the browser, direct access. It's a much better user experience. As I'll show you, it's just another icon on the desktop. When we talk about contractors at BYOD, how often do we have to ship out laptops, and do we always get them back? We've got a number of financials specifically where they're sending out just a link in their the contractor's personal email. It says, "Hey, download this browser." They download the browser, they authenticate in, and they're working in 5 minutes. I've had to send no hardware because this is critical. Even BYOD, user wants to work from home or from their iPhone. Cool, no problem. We support that. And again, we can manage all those interactions with those services right through the browser. When we look at zero trust, when I'm thinking zero trust, I don't trust the user, I don't trust the device, I don't trust the application, I don't trust the network. All those variables we can manage in a much more streamlined fashion. Again, from the end user's perspective, as I'll show you, it's just another button they click on, get direct access straight to the service. So even if it's on-prem, I can still give you the ability to connect to that service, but I don't have to set up a full VPN. I don't have to re-authenticate. All that extra stuff is basically washed out of the way. VDI reduction, VPN reduction. Again, what we see is a lot of customers force their users to go to a VM, a virtual machine, to gain access to the SaaS services. We're saying let's get rid of all that and go directly to the service itself. And if you do have older applications that require a thick client, for example, sure, we'll still utilize that VDI, but from a cost perspective, that virtual farm, the infrastructure, the compute, all that gets reduced. And we say yes. That basically says, yeah, if you want to give end users access to their personal Dropbox account, their personal email, sure, all day long. While at the same time, though, if you want to make sure that they can't upload into it, that they can't copy and paste into that, we can still manage it. If you want to give them access to go to YouTube, okay, sure, but let's put a timer on that. They only have access to that maybe for 30 minutes between the hours of 12 p.m. and 1 p.m. So there's a lot of capability here. I'm sure you'll have some questions when I jump into the interface. Any questions on that, guys? Okay, well then I'm just going to kind of keep moving on. All right. So here we have our FlexKey portal, if you will, our work enterprise browser. And as you can see here, as I mentioned a moment ago, this looks, feels, smells, and tastes just like Chrome, right? We've got our settings here, our extensions, bookmarks, all those variables are the same. Nothing really changes. Now, again, as I mentioned, where the real differentiator is the single sign-on. So we can see here Mr. AJ is authenticated in the browser. And so based on this user, I wish I could move that. Let me see if I can move this out of the way. Here, there we go. Based on this user, he's entitled to these, 5 or 6 or 10 applications because that's what he needs to do his job. If I were to open up another browser here, maybe from a contractor where I've got Mr. Jason Story authenticated in, well, he's a contractor. And because he's a contractor, he even states it up there. I'm still seeing the company logo, so I know I'm in the company browser. But as a contractor, I only have access to these 6 applications. So I can slice and dice the types of access per user, tying it back to my Active Directory infrastructure, whether that's Azure or whatever, very easily and build policies around that. And what I want to show you is when we get into all that last mile control I mentioned earlier, I'm going to jump into Salesforce, but what I'm going to show you guys, I can do with any browser, or excuse me, with any browser. You can only do it with the Outlook browser. Forgive me, I've done this a couple of times today. What I'm going to show you here is that the capability I'm putting in play here, I can do with any SaaS or web-based service. So I'd like to show you, though, before I get into it, kind of the then and now, if you will. I want to show you what everybody's doing right now. We're all utilizing a consumer-based browser to gain access to my company enterprise applications. So in that scenario, kind of like what we have here, if I'm an end user, I can easily open up this file and download it. If I wanted to, I could right-click on here and do a save as or print. You'll see there's a credit card number here. If I wanted to, I could easily copy that. And if I wanted to, jump over here into my personal Dropbox account and I could easily paste that in there. Nothing's really stopping me. Even from the perspective of opening up a little screen capturing tool, right? I could easily, again, grab that same credit card number. So there's a number of ways that the data essentially can be lost or stolen, however you want to look at that, when we're trying to incorporate, again, a consumer-based browser like a Chrome or Edge or Safari, Firefox, right, within our corporate apps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pivot over here real quickly to the management console. And this is just a SaaS cloud-based service. So everything I'm going to show you here, I could have one of these things stood up and rendering very quickly, very fast. 10 minutes, I could have one of these spun up for you. Let me make sure this is applied across the board. And in doing that, we can easily deploy out some browsers, another 10, and I could have you working 30 minutes. It's a very simple tool to utilize. As I mentioned, it's a simple product, but it's a very powerful product. So I'm going to jump back over here into the end user experience. Typically, the policies take about anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes to update. Let me do a little refresh here real quick. But right off the bat, you're going to start noticing some things here where we've got the FlexKey kind of logo there in the background. We've got the user's name plastered on the page, these watermarks. We've got this company internal kind of telling the user expectations of how to utilize this service. We were going, okay, well, that's cool, Adrian. Why do I need this AJ Jones plaster on the page? Well, I want to prevent my user from pulling out their phone and trying to take a screen capture of this. I mean, obviously they can, but it's going to be very hard for me to scrape my information off the page. You'll also notice in the bottom right-hand corner here, I've got this QR code. If this gets leaked, my information is tied to it. AJ is going to be busted by your incident response team. At the same time, the end users might come in here and try to work with the data, but I've got some guardrails. So for example, now if I try to right-click on this and do a save as, that's not allowed. If I try to paste, that's not allowed. Now, as I mentioned, I still want the user to be efficient. So in this example, if I need to download the file because I can't really do anything with it inside Salesforce, I'm going to download the file. As you can see here, it's going to prompt me. Do you really need to download this? So maybe based on the user, and again, the branding is there, following throughout, I might be jumping on an airplane for a couple of hours. I want to have internet access. I want to actually submit for download for that. Or, for example, here, maybe the user, based on the information itself, I'm allowing you to download it, but it's going to go to the company cloud storage. You can see they're open in OneDrive. What I've essentially said is that I'm going to allow you to edit the file, but it has to stay within the corporate cloud storage, whether that's OneDrive or G Drive, Google, whatever. And there will be certain times, of course, we're just based on the information in the file itself. I'm just not going to allow access, right? Just because every time I try to do that download, I'm running a DLP scan against the file. I'm also running a malware scan against the file, embedded in that PDF. I don't want to allow that. So again, there's a number of ways here that I'm enabling the user, but I'm also coaching the user. The credit card number that you saw a moment ago now has the sensitive data on top of it. The credit card number is there. I just have the ability through this layer 7 functionality without breaking and inspecting the traffic to manage all the interaction. So for example here, if I still wanted the user to getting access to this, maybe they need to, run a refund. I can click on the sensitive data, or I can try what was one here. And that will allow me then to maybe enable the end user to have access to run that refund. And I'm not sure why that's doing that policy. Refresh for a second. Try this one more time. There we go. And we can see here, I know I'm being audited, but I still need access to it because I'm a manager. I'm all cool. And so now I've got access. I can see the credit card number. The difference is now when I try to click copy and I jump back over here into my personal Dropbox account, which now has this big red border around it saying, hey, you've got limited access. This is not corporate. And that credit card number that was there a moment ago in real time has now been, essentially blocked or redacted. And if I try to paste this now, that's not allowed. In fact, if I jumped outside of the browser itself and come in over here to, let's say, WordPad, you can see what I did this a moment ago. And I try to paste it in there. It says, sorry, that's not allowed. So I'm putting guardrails around user expectation and what the user can do. Although the difference is, if I come over to accounts audit, which is in the company cloud storage, not my personal Dropbox, and I try to paste that in there, that's allowed. So I have the flexibility to determine what types of access the end users that have with the data. And then, of course, the last little piece here, you saw the screen capturing a moment ago. I've actually got a policy in place that says, hey, if you open up a tab within accounting, the accounts tab, and you're sharing, which I'm currently sharing right now over Teams, those end users that you're sharing with are not going to be able to see that. I can see what's on the screen. I'm pretty sure you can't. If I were to try to utilize the snipping tool here again, essentially this is what you guys are seeing. You're only seeing the pixels outside of the browser. Although I have the flexibility, again, based on specific users, where I might allow justification to go ahead and give visibility to that. I'm going to show you guys again, just to kind of show you here. This is what I'm seeing. So a lot of functionality here to enable you to be frictionless for your end user within their job, and at the same time add some specific protections around information. I'm going to get into more user enablement here in a moment, but I'm throwing a lot at you fast. Are any questions on this? All right, the silence is deadly, guys. Cool. All right, well, then I'll keep moving here. I did, as mentioned, want to show you user enablement. So what I mean by that is, for example, our clipboard manager. We do not write the disk. Everything's stored within the browser. Everything's encrypted, all your sessions, all your cookies. But you can see here, when I was right-clicking on this information, it copies it over here into our clipboard. And why is that useful? Well, let's just say, for example, you've got users that are doing certain types of tasks repetitively. Let's say I come over here to the contacts page. I'm going to open that tab up. And when I go into the contacts page, I jump in here and I look up specific users because I need to contact them. And so what I've done is I've got this smart clips functionality here where I basically said, whenever the user comes over into the details page, I want you to gather some of these fields and populate them over on the right. So we can see here, Mr. Paul Davison. I expand that out. I can see that information that I need to work with. And now maybe if I jump over here into my email and I try to send that user an email, well, I simply just collect that. And okay, well, cool. What's the subject? Well, it's this invoice number. And what are we discussing? So again, ease of use. I don't want the user to try to write it down. There's potential for error there. They can't take it out of the browser, but I still wanted them to be able to work with the information. Tools like this, tools like our password manager, where I can auto-populate the passwords into the pages they're going to. All automatic. We've got other pieces in here with their, if you need to actually take a screen capture, I can do that. We've got our own AI assistant. Instead of utilizing ChatGPT, we want to keep it within the confines of the browser itself. All right, guys, so I'm going to pivot from here. And again, if you have any questions, just jump right in. Don't be shy. The other big piece here I want to touch on is our zero trust. You are, especially in the GovEd space, education, SLED, there's always old applications, things that the developers created probably 15 years ago that are gone, but we still need to get access to that. With our zero trust capability, we can do just that. So for example, what I mean is, let's just say, again, I'm sitting at home with Starbucks, wherever, and I want access to an on-prem resource, not a cloud service, but actually in the within the environment at the office. You can see here, I'm clicking on this specific icon on the screen here. You can also see I've got an internal IP address, non-routable, right? So I'm gaining access to a service on-prem, but I did not have to set up a VPN tunnel to do it. I'm going directly to it. Maybe I've got, I need shell service, shell access. Again, same piece, capability here. I'm interacting right with the page. Tell it right. Difference is, I did not set up a VPN. I went directly to the application itself. The capability here, from an end user's perspective, straight on, right? It's just another icon. If I need access to a thick app, cool. I can give you direct access to that Azure, AVD, virtual session, or an RDP session. The difference is here, if I try to come over here and copy that information, and I want to take it again outside of the browser, let me try to bring that back up. What you don't currently have typically in an RDP session or those, VDIs, is you don't have all the point, click, copy, paste navigation. You're not gathering that intelligence, as I'm going to show you we are. And again, I couldn't paste that out, right? But then, again, when I'm thinking about this, the biggest piece here to me is with a VPN, the user is basically logged onto the network, right? It's just if I'm sitting on the local network. And if I wanted to start sniffing around to see where services are, I can easily do that. You might have segmenting, but you're still opening yourself up. With this tool, there's no east-west lateral movement. In fact, if my device itself were compromised, maybe there's some malware on there, it cannot propagate because I'm only giving access to the services that the end user needs. Other quick, easy tools, URL filtering. If I go to ESPN.com, as I mentioned, everything's going to render at 100% as you would expect. But if I see, hey, my team's winning the game, but I'm going to go place a bet at DraftKings. Well, I've got a simple rule in play that says anytime you go to gambling, pornography, drugs, I'm going to have access to that. Again, the DraftKings page is literally there, but the A user does not see that. So I don't have to send the traffic back through a proxy or your on-prem stack for security to manage this. It's all managed again within the browser because that layer 7 we are controlling. I mentioned malware a moment ago. Again, the user goes to a site, wrong one there, goes to a site and they want to download a PDF. This site's always kind of slow, guys. You're going to see it rendering here. Pointing out, though, that, again, if I go to a site and I click on some type of, hey, I want to download information, this type doc. Well, we're going to scan for that, but we're not doing it locally in the browser. Just like our web filtering, we're essentially sending a call to an API. Let me click on that one more time and try that again. Page is kind of a pain. You can see here in a moment that I'm trying to download the file. What we're going to do is we're going to scan the hash of the file, as you see. We're just making a quick call out Bitdefender, but of course, if you're utilizing CrowdStrike or one of those other vendors, we can correlate with that sandbox too. So just like the URL filtering in real time, it's all pretty seamless for the end user's experience. There's no questions. I'm going to go ahead and kind of wrap this up in the management console. So let's jump over here into the analytics. And what I like about this is you're going to get a very high level understanding of what your users are doing. So all your point, click, copy, paste, all their interactions for all the sites they're going to, it's all here. And you can see I've got my Mr. AJ Jones, so I'm gathering all the intel on them. And if I kind of start scrolling down, maybe I want to look specifically for a verdict that's blocked only. So if I kind of scroll down and look for the red, we can see some of that right here. Oh, okay, well, what's going on? So what I might want to do is try to understand what the user is doing. So I might expand this out and kind of get into some details here to kind of understand what the end user is doing within the page itself. In fact, from here, I'm actually going to jump over. Let me jump over to Salesforce, but it's kind of cooler than what we're looking at. Okay, within Salesforce, cut, copy, paste, Dropbox. In fact, I'm going to jump into more of the expert mode. Scrolling down here, zero abstraction was blocked. That's when I was actually prevented from doing the right click on the page to print out what was in Salesforce. Let's see here where we start doing it in Dropbox. There we go. And was that previous there was zero trust? So let's get a more granular view. Let's just say that you're concerned about, you've got some in some of our dashboards, some alerts coming up about a specific user. I want to understand what that user is doing. Somebody jump into their timeline. Well, here we can see where the user was essentially working within the page itself. I'm going to kind of back up in some of this and find the right piece that I was looking for a moment ago. Here we see where the user actually clicked on that credit card number, if you recall, right? And in doing that, he did a copy. Right? You can see here, I copied that credit card number. What's funny, a few minutes later, he jumps over into his personal Dropbox account. I can see here where he clicked and actually initiated a paste. So I've got the full story of understanding what the user tried to do. We know we can, see users trying to, a specific user jumping into monster.com and then uploading their resume a few seconds later. And then they pivot from there to go to your internal cloud storage. And now they're trying to download a lot of intellectual property. We're going to have a record of all that. If you want to port that out to something like your own, corporate SIM, we can easily accommodate that also. Again, there's a lot more details we can got to get into here, guys. A lot of flexibility, a lot of functionality, but hopefully that kind of whets your appetite as far as where the enterprise browser is going. I truly believe in the next couple of 3 years here, 2 or 3 years, this is going to be the main staple that everybody's moving to. So any questions on that? Everybody's having such a good time. Cool. All right. Well, Meredith, I appreciate it. Thank you for having us on here today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this was fantastic. You got a lot of information out of this, and definitely looking forward to seeing more of this. And you guys are releasing new features all the time. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, some of the bigger pieces are the ability to, like you saw with the Zero Trust, where I connect to my on-prem applications. Those are all kind of a web front end. We are getting into all ports and all protocols. So connecting to your thick apps and managing that, or even allowing the end user to run, let's just say, for example, as you saw, I couldn't prevented the user from copying the notepad on their laptop, right? But out of the browser. But if I wanted to allow them to copy to their, their Word doc, the thick client on the laptop, I can have the flexibility to do that. So that's kind of where we're breaking outside of the browser, and then even DLP outside of the browser too. So yes, we are definitely adding on more technology constantly.
That's fantastic. Folks really getting a great value for what they're paying for with Island. That's incredible.
I think so, but I'm a little biased. I've been drinking the Kool-Aid for a couple of years.
I think we all are, to be honest. I think this is a great tool, again, for public sector for a lot of different reasons that you kind of illustrated today, especially when it comes to that security, that compliance. It's all becoming more and more relevant in a world that's constantly, where our data is constantly under threat, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
All right, I guess with that, we'll go ahead and wrap a little bit early. Again, thank you so much to the Island team. Thank you so much, Stephanie and Adrian. And we'll definitely be probably tagging you guys on LinkedIn and on our YouTube channel. And we look forward to working with you guys. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Bye.